Alright, what are we doing today? We're playing Devil May Cry 5. Oh, that's great, but I mean, it has been done a million times, so what are we doing here? Well, we're going to do a playthrough of the Dante Must Die difficulty. Well, that has also been done a million times, you may say, so why are we doing it today? So, to put this in the simplest way I can think of, well, first of all, I should talk about why I wanted to do this video series. So, I've seen a lot of, well, people's comments online about either struggling to get through DMD and to S-rank it, or that it's simply not fun to play on DMD. Usually, the reasons are either the enemies have too much health, or that the enemies are just not responsive to your attacks because, well, they pop the devil triggers. Anyways, just in general, they think it's too difficult, and they can't have fun. To which I must say that, while I respect everyone's opinions, I think that it's a real shame that they couldn't enjoy playing this mode, because from my experience, DMC5's Dante Must Die mode is a very well-balanced game mode that provides both challenge and plenty of ways to have fun with all the mechanics. Which also ties into what I think is another misconception, is that people seem to think that as long as you don't reach that status of the combo masters, that level of skill that you see people doing in combo mats and such, that they would never be able to conquer this game. In order to promote how to better have fun on Dante Must Die difficulty, and just sort of bridge that gap between the beginner level and all the way up to the combo masters, this video series would hopefully act as sort of an intermediate level guide that will demonstrate what I believe are the basis of how you can play well in this game. And I would argue that even if you never really want to become a combo master, like me, I never do, that just by learning some fundamental things, concepts, about how to do well on difficult modes, like DMD, you'll actually understand the game much more, and that will allow you to have way more fun doing it. So as an attempt to achieve what I just said, this video series is going to be me playing through this game on Dante Must Die difficulty, getting all the S ranks, meanwhile not really sort of obsessing over getting high scores, to the point where you start to not really play the game, but instead you're like exploiting it, just straight up cheating, such as like turning the camera away from all enemies, or just straight up using Dante's hat specifically for that purpose. Which we'll get to that when we actually goes to Dante's missions. Okay, that's great, but you might ask, well, what do I mean by playing normally? Well, in hopes of quantifying what I'm trying to do, I have written down a few restrictions that I'll try to follow throughout this video guide. So the current plan is, well, first of all, I will not be doing any amount of air combos that involves multiple enemy steps, aka jump cancelling. The reason for that is because while doing jump cancelling combos, and the longer the combo goes, the safer and more efficient it gets, you're going to take exponentially more time to practice and sort of obtain that consistency and precision to perform longer air combos. Which I think is arguably a bit discouraging to newcomers, unnecessarily so, I may add, because in my experience, instead focusing on things about knowledge of the game, such as enemy patterns, or the specific use cases of your various skills, takes way less time and way easier to implement and just make the game more fun. It is not that I will refrain from using all the tools that the game gives you, it's just that I hope to focus on how having knowledge of these skills and the game itself will help you, instead of focusing on how my years of experience on doing complex inputs will help make the game easier, which is usually not obtainable easily by newcomers. And in the same spirit, I will also refrain from sort of relying on skills that are very much timing based, like very strictly timing based, such as max acting and like perfect royal guards. God damn, That took an uncanny amount of time just to record this, like, 3-4 minute intros. Well, anyways, let's start the game. Okay, first mission. We're gonna start with the prologue, of course. Now, as you can see on the bottom right corner, that we're using a very boring breaker layout, which is just all overtures. Not because I particularly recommend overture or anything. In fact, I'm not really going to talk about the breaker system in this mission. There are plenty of things to talk about other than breakers, so let's get right to it. Now, we're starting with Nero, which there are a couple of things to talk about here. Actually, you know what? Let's stop right here. Let me explain some things first. Now, since we're talking about Nero, we have to talk about the exceed system, of course. I've seen a lot of opinions that revolves around this idea that you have to learn how to max act most, if not all of your moves. Which I would argue is mostly not the case, unless you're chasing some kind of, you're trying to break some kind of record or like speed runs. Otherwise, it's really not necessary. Not even most of it, in fact. I would argue that you only need to focus on a very limited amount that you need to learn the timing to exceed, let alone max acting. Well, let's not waste time talking about what I think. Let's get straight to what I recommend you to practice. Now, the most important skill that I would recommend you to practice max acting on would be the air taunt. Now, there are a couple of reasons. Well, for one, in this game, height and air time in general means safety. The longer you stay in the air, the safer you are, because most enemies in this game cannot attack you in the air. Secondly, when you try to rev your sword during the air taunt, even if you fail, you do not actually expand any of your exceed gauge. Which means that as long as you don't use any actual attacks and you just keep pressing the air taunt and revving, you will eventually get all 3 exceed gauge to do your level 3 exceed attacks. And if you have any more extra time to practice exceed timings, I would simply recommend that you focus on the first hit of the ground combo and the first hit of the air combo. These two are the first to come out whenever you use Red Queen, and they're just the most accessible ones. And I would argue that these 3 are all that you really need to practice on. And the exceed timings on other skills would simply be a nice bonus whenever you hit them. It is simply not necessary to practice timing on every skill. Now, one last thing before we actually get into any combat stuff is we gotta talk about the mapping for Nero's charge shot, which is an extremely useful and powerful attack in general that is going to help you immensely on your damage output and your crowd control, and just in general keeping the style level up. But you need to hold onto that gun button for a long time to charge up your charge shot. It is best to remap the gun button to one of the triggers, or shoulder buttons, whichever you prefer. I use the right trigger, so whichever button you use, as long as the task of holding down on the charge shot doesn't interrupt with you doing your melee combos, you'll be fine. Okay, we can finally start playing the game. So, we're in the prologue. As you could probably remember, the prologue actually isn't that difficult in the first place. So, why are we starting here instead of jumping straight to the actual difficult missions? Well, I'll actually use the 2 coming fights in this prologue as a background example to illustrate a very core concept that I will keep repeating throughout this video series, which is to emphasize the importance of playing safe. Now, I understand that you might want to call me crazy on that, because, well, that sounds ridiculous, right? How do you play safe while keeping that combo meter up? That is ridiculous. Right, I understand that is a valid concern. Now, the reason why I want to emphasize the concept of safety is because on Dante Must Die difficulty, the dynamics between you and your enemies actually change quite a bit because of the Devil Trigger mechanic. No, not the Devil Trigger of your characters, but for demons. Okay, I really hope that I could have done all of this in like one take. Turns out there's just way too much stuff to explain, so here we go. I'm just going to explain the DT mechanic here, and then I guess at the end I'll just restart the whole mission and do it legit. Now that purple aura over there means that the enemy has entered DT, which you're probably quite familiar with, considering that you are watching this video. Enemy in DT hit like a truck, and they take less damage, and they simply can't be stunned with 1 or 2 hits. It usually takes quite a few. So as soon as the game throws in some tougher demons, such as the green white here, and they usually enter DT quite fast, and they will just ruin your day if you charge in and don't care about safety. So in short, the DT mechanic for demons greatly changes your ability to do crowd control simply by charging in and being aggressive. Okay, I realized that it is actually way easier to explain in the Void, so here we go. Basically, the point I'm trying to get across in terms of safety is simply that you adhere to a general principle of safe entry and safe exit when you try to fight any enemy. As you probably know by now, enemies will just start their attacks whenever they get to a certain distance. And usually after they attack, there will be a window where they cannot immediately start another attack, which is where you can jump in safely without being hit. So safe entry is really just about going in at the right time, usually right after an enemy's attack. And safe exit is just the opposite. You get out of there before the enemy starts the next attack. It's really that simple. Now, this alone might sound like a very boring playstyle to follow, but what I'm talking about here is actually just the foundation, the sort of core values that you need to keep in mind of when you try to build up your own playstyle. Now, the game gives you a lot of tools actually to sort of not adhere to that principle and get away with charging in just fine, which we will talk about more in later missions. But for now, in the prologue, I would just like to really focus on demonstrating and promoting this core principle of safe entry and exit. So that's what we'll do. So anyways, that was a lot of cutting and redoing the fight. So let's show an actual all the way through, from start to finish, using the exact principle that I talked about. Be safe. Make sure you have a window before you jump in, and you should be fine.
I can take you with no one. Let's get airborne.
Remember to use your taunt. Air taunt into Racking. Oh hey, that's a nice bonus. Once again, I did not practice max setting on anything other than the air taunts, really. And maybe the first hits of ground and air combos. So, anything else you see is just a bonus, really. Alright. Going well so far.
I trust you.
Oh, by the way, as you can see on the right, that we got 4,866 points. Well, anyways, the criteria for S ranks on DMD, as I remember, is about 6,000 points. Now, as you probably know, you don't actually need to get 6,000 points in the fight. As long as you don't die during the mission, you'll get the 1.2 times bonus for no continues. So in that sense, as long as you reach a little bit more than 5,200, it is pretty safe to assume that you will get that S rank. By the way, you notice that I'm trying to take out the green and booster first, which is, well, usually the recommendation that you will see in other places as well, since they will heal up the enemies. But, this is just a side note, but if you feel like you don't have enough stylish points in a fight, and there are green and boosters, you could also do the opposite and just let them heal up the demons, so that you can do more damage, and earn more points that way. Now you can see the Impulsor Queen enters DT a lot faster than normal enemies, so you gotta be careful about that. Remember, go in and go out. Now, you saw me use DT just now as an alternative to jumping away, which is a great thing to do, but if you're just starting out, you don't really have to do it. Just keep jumping away, and you'll be fine. In general, as long as you don't get hit, you can easily keep a S rank or above on your style meter, which is usually enough score to hit that S rank on the mission as well. And by the way, as you can see here, in general, I'm not doing anything fancy or with any long combos. I'm just doing very short bursts of hits and jumping away. I am using enemy step, but not for any combo purposes. As you can see there, just by playing normally, you can get way above the bottom line for S ranks. Now, the prologue is pretty short, and we're about to reach the end here by heading into the boss room. But before that, as you can see here, there are a few impulses here. On their own, it's nothing to talk about, but it is a good time to talk about the importance of skipping optional fights. Now, in short, the total mission score that you'll get by the end of every mission is basically an average score from each battle that you do. So that means that if you do very small battles in between, like killing the impulses right here, you will be given a lower score naturally because it is more difficult to get your style ranking high when doing these smaller fights. You will, in turn, basically drag down your average score. So the only natural conclusion is that you will need to skip these optional fights whenever possible. Now, that doesn't mean these demons are completely useless to you. You can actually use them to advantage, but we'll talk more about that in later missions. For now, just remember, don't engage with these optional fights if they're too small.
Let's get airborne. Hold on, Dante.
Oh, as you can see, my score actually dropped a little bit, probably because I hit that Ambusa a couple of times. So do really remember, don't hit them if you don't want to engage. Now, before we enter the boss fight, as you probably know by now, that in the prologue you are supposed to lose the boss, but you can actually beat him. But that would be outside of the scope of this video series, so I will not be including how to defeat this boss fight, at least not in this video. Maybe by the end of the video series I will do an additional episode of how to do all these additional boss fights and how to actually beat Urizen. But for now, I'll just follow the plot and get my ass beat. And I suppose I can also demonstrate how you will get your ass beat if you don't know the boss patterns of this fight. Now, as you can probably tell by now, Urizen has a lot of different attacks and combinations that is just designed to really get you if you don't know what you're doing. He has attacks of all kinds of ranges, and he hits pretty hard even before he DTs, and he absolutely will in this mode. Urizen has a DT. So if you really want to beat this fight, you better make sure that you remember every single pattern, the whole loop of his attacks from start to finish, and figure out a safe way to enter in and out, which once again is not the point of today's video, so we'll just get our ass beat. As you can see, the stylish point does not change before and after the fight, because you didn't actually do any damage to the boss. The crystal doesn't count. And as you can see, we got an S rank relatively easily. Of course, the prologue wasn't any of the tougher missions of this game, let alone Dante Must Die. So I expect most people will not have trouble getting S ranks on this mission, but I hope that I've demonstrated what I'm trying to do with this video series. Now, if you have any questions or just suggestions on how to do better for this video series, please do tell me in the comments. I hope this helps, and I guess I'll see you in the next one.